The M1 KVT is the American top tier pack premium. It sits at 10.3 but will occasionally get up tiered to 10.7 and 11.0, and it will suffer there. It has a very strong 105mm gun, strong armor including on its cheeks, has a large weak spot near its upper glacis, but that can be hidden. It has the biggest advantage over other top tiers being its mobility. Its mobility is amazing. You are one of the fastest MBTs in the game on open terrain, and your reverse speed is such that you can easily dictate the engagements you take over your enemies. All in all, it is a very utilitarian, very basic MBT, but it's quite strong. Solid 7.5 to 8 out of 10. The F4S Phantom 2 is the American top tier pack premium, sitting at 11.3. As a Phantom, you're going to suffer the normal issues, the biggest one of these being your airframe. You bleed speed very, very quickly, and getting in any sharp turn guarantees it'll take you far too long to get back up your speed, meaning turning engagements are all but off the table. That being said, the F4S has a very capable radar. Sitting this in pulse Doppler head-on mode allows you to win most head-ons by simply flinging an AIM-7F and waiting for it to connect. This is one of the most capable SAR-H missiles at this tier. Rely on that and use your AIM-9Hs when you can. They're quite reliable in rear aspect. Other than that, it's not a very complicated aircraft, but pretty fun and strong to play. 7 out of 10. The Leopard 2 Panzer Battalion 123 is the top-tier German pack premium vehicle, sitting at 10.3. The Leopard is one of the strongest premium vehicles in the game. The 2A4 is already incredible, and the pack premium is just the 2A4 with funny camo netting. Your gun will destroy most things in a single hit as long as you hit them in the right area, obviously their weak spot, and your armor can repel basically everything. Think of this like a tiger, but don't angle it. Essentially, hold angles, rush where you can, and rely on your armor combined with overwhelming firepower to destroy enemies. You're not super agile, but you're definitely not agile. The only weak spot is on the right side of the turret. There is the viewport. But other than that, A-okay. I would say this is a 9.5 out of 10. The MiG-21 bis Lazar M is the top-tier German aviation pack premium, sitting at 11.0. It is ultimately basically the same as the other MiG-21 bis in the game. That being said, for those of you who haven't used that, it has relatively good flight performance, losing a lot of speed on turns but regaining it quickly with a very powerful engine. It has access to 6 missiles, and all 6 of them can be all-aspect missiles. These all-aspect missiles are R60Ms and are good, but will go for flares. I'd recommend hitting people right in the cockpit in a head-on at about 1 kilometer away, or simply reserving them for oblivious enemies. These are good, and the gun is usable, but overall, at 11.0, you get really bad up tiers, and the aircraft isn't the best. I would give it roughly a 6 out of 10, going up to a 7 if you aren't up tiered. The T-72AV Terms T is the Russian top-tier ground pack premium, sitting at 10.0. This tank has a lot of things that are very good and a lot of things that are very bad, and not much in between. On the positive side, we have some very strong armor, including good ERA bricks and a well-angled upper frontal plate that's difficult to pen even for MBTs at its own tier. It also has an incredibly competent main gun with some of the best pen at its tier and the best post-pen damage being a 125mm. On the flip side, it's very weak to its sides and its lower frontal plate, and it has very low reverse speed and even main speed. That being said, it's still very strong overall and a solid 7 out of 10. The MiG-23ML is the Soviet or Russian top-tier aviation pack premium. It sits at 11.3 and is one of the strongest planes at that BR, especially amongst the premium ones. It has access to 4 IR missiles typically, and then 2 R-24s. Typically, I'd recommend taking the SAR-H versions of these, the R-24R, but the R-24T IR variant is quite good as well. The MiG-23 is large, but it turns better than most other large aircraft, and it has the advantage of being able to take more punishment. It is a very competent main gun, one of the better radars in the game, and compared with its missiles, it is an incredibly potent air-to-air fighter. Overall, 9.0 out of 10. The Challenger DS is the British top-tier ground pack premium, sitting at 10.0. This is a very competent MBT with good armor all around, good mobility, and a very strong main gun that has great pen, post-pen damage, and reload speed. The only few downsides are going to be a very, very big weak spot on the lower front plate, but that can be hidden, and the fact that if you get in a fight against multiple targets, your slightly lower turret traversal, combined with a reload that isn't super fast but isn't slow, can get you to die. Overall, it is a very, very solid MBT at the tiers it plays at, and I would give it a solid 8 out of 10. The F4J UK is the top-tier British aviation pack premium. Being essentially the exact same as the American F4J, it's solid but can suffer at 11.3, especially in up tiers to 11.7 and 12.0. That being said, it has a very solid 8 missile load with 4 rear aspect IRs and 4, I would recommend SAR-Hs. The British Skyflash dogfighters are similar to AIM-7Fs, though they are a little bit faster to track off the rail, but have slightly worse tracking and speed over distances. Overall, this is a very, very solid aircraft, weaker airframe, but good weapons. I give it a solid 7 out of 10. The VRCC is the Italian top-tier ground pack premium, sitting at 9.0. This is a very competent armored car. Its design is a little funky, and so you can get in a lot of those situations where the front of it's visible, but the gun isn't able to see the enemy, but is still quite good. Its mobility is solid, arguably better than a lot of the other top-tier armored cars, and its gun, while not having the best pen in the world, has more than enough and incredibly good bullet velocity and range. This is a fantastic tank. If you're quick enough, you can win easily in urban battles against MBTs, and if you aren't, then you can still use it as a sniper. Overall, this gets a very deserved 7.5 out of 10. The F104 TAF is the Italian top-tier aviation pack premium, sitting at 11.0. This is probably the only top-tier pack premium I will genuinely recommend that you do not buy. It is quite bad. Using an F104 at 11.0 is already not particularly advised without the up tier, given that it is a very clunky and hard to use airframe with bad turning and only a speed as its advantage. This one gets good missiles ish. The AIM-9Ps are solid, but they're not anything to write home about, and your gun is still going to be the primary way you try and kill people. Overall, this is quite bad, and for that reason gets a 2 out of 10. The Type 16 First Production Series is the top-tier Japanese ground pack premium, sitting at 8.7. It is a pretty standard and generic armored car, getting good speed, relatively low profile, high degree of mobility except for if you need to turn, especially with no access to neutral steering. It gets a good gun with solid pen, but given its weak armor, you largely have to use it as a sniper and engage targets that are oblivious to your existence. If you can hit people in their weak spot, typically around their turret ring, you can knock them out in one hit in a head-on, but it's very much recommended that you don't try and do that. Overall, it's pretty bog standard for an armored car, has the normal strengths and the normal weaknesses, and I give it a solid 6.5 out of 10. The F4 EJADTW is the Japanese top-tier aviation pack premium, sitting at 11.0. And it's okay at its BR. In an up tier, it'll seriously suffer. Its radar isn't particularly strong, and its main radar missile, the AIM-7E, won't track quite as well as most of the other things at its tier. Its AIM-9Ps are alright in rear aspect, but really the way that this plane can be used to its best ability is by taking all 4 of its guns, allowing it to shred anything at any tier in a flurry of 20mm gunfire. It's not amazing, and it's definitely not one of the better grinding planes in the game, but it's incredibly fun to use, and it can still perform alright at its tiers. 5.5. The Type 96A prototype is the Japanese top-tier ground pack premium, sitting at 10.0. It plays very similar to the T72 and T72AV, of course. However, it does have some noticeable differences. First off, its round is roughly equal, but I would argue slightly stronger. And second, it's far more survivable. Its turret is less likely to be penned, and it doesn't lose its entire crew to breach hits quite as much, though it does lose its breach a little more often. I would say if you like the T72s, you'll like this. If you don't, you probably won't. It still suffers from that drastically weak mobility and non-existent reverse speed. Overall, it's a very particular tank, but if you learn how to use it, it is one of the strongest at its tier, and for that, it earns a 7.5 out of 10. The J7D is the top-tier Chinese aviation pack premium, sitting at 11.0. Now, just as the other MiG-21 that sits at top tier in pack premiums, you have to learn to use the guns on this thing because its missiles are leaving a lot to be desired. You get good flight performance and a solid amount of fuel, and your guns are strong if you learn how to use them. You also get access to Magic 1s, which are one of the best rear aspect missiles in the game. But not having access to any all-aspect missiles or any competent radar missiles at 11.0 with consistent up tiers to 11.7 and 12.0 is incredibly punishing. Overall, if you learn how to use this thing, it can be great for grinding your tech tree, but it's definitely not good for getting SL, and it's not amazing overall, and for that, it earns a 5 out of 10. The AMX30 Super is the French top-tier ground pack premium, sitting at 9.0. At first glance, this tank looks to be relatively bad, with no armor, only a 105mm gun, not amazing pen or post-pen damage, doesn't look to be particularly special. However, it has fantastic mobility and turret traversal speed, and the reload is more than adequate. Overall, if you can use this tank correctly, it can be amazing. For beginners, it's not fantastic, but for people who already know how to play ground RB, you can easily use this to do far better than most of the other tanks at 9.0. And for that reason, it gets a 6.5, but an easy 7.5 to 8 if you know your stuff. The Mirage F1C 200 is the French top-tier aviation pack premium, sitting at 11.3. This plane is fantastic. It has a little slow acceleration, but its speed retention is amazing. It gets access to 4 AAMs typically, up to 5. Only 2 of those can be Magic 2s, though, which are the real missile you want to use. One of the biggest advantages of this plane, however, is that it can easily take a near-full bomb load and missile load and not see its max speed or acceleration reduced by any significant amount. So, for grinders, that means you can quite easily go in, bomb a base, then take out a couple targets with your Magic 2s and start to go to the airfield and get all of that done without having your speed impacted significantly. Fantastic plane overall, and gets a well-deserved 8 out of 10. The CV90-105 is the Swedish top-tier ground pack premium, sitting at 10.0. It's an interesting vehicle with very few counterparts in the game. It has weak armor, paper armor. You will get killed by BMP-2s in this thing. However, it also has a strong 105mm gun with a 5-second autoloader, meaning if you hit somebody and their first shot does not kill you, you have a good chance at killing them with your second shot, unless, of course, they have a drastically faster reload. This thing is amazing at hunting MBTs at range or even up close, relying on its fast reload and butter-smooth driving and drive performance. Overall, this thing gets a well-deserved 7 out of 10. The Saab J35XS is the Swedish top-tier aviation pack premium, sitting at 10.7. It is an alarmingly good plane without looking so on paper. It gets very low countermeasures and very low cannon ammo. Its cannon is a little bit wonky to use since you don't have any tracers on any of the ammo types, but if you learn to use it, you can easily nab some kills and assists with it. Its missiles are quite strong in rear aspect and will usually ignore flares, though they can be a little finicky. Overall, if this thing gets up tiered to 11.3 or 11.7, it will suffer enormously. But it won't have those up tiers most of the time and will perform quite well. And for this, it gets a 6.5 out of 10. The Merkava Mark II-D is the Israeli top-tier ground pack premium at 9.3, and it is surprisingly good at that tier. Its armor isn't amazing, but it's pretty solid all around, including on the sides, and it can tank multiple shots easily as the post-pen damage isn't usually enough to kill it. Its gun will one-hit most MBTs as long as you shoot center of mass, and it gets a lot of machine guns to back that up. Its mobility isn't the best, but it's certainly not as bad as many of the Eastern tanks, and around the same as perhaps the British or the Germans. Overall, this is a very, very competent tank and doesn't require a lot of skill or special playing to use, which earns it an 8.5 out of 10. The Kfir Canard is the top-tier aviation pack premium for Israel, and it sits at 10.7. It's not an amazing dogfighter, especially given that it loses a lot of stability once you get under 500 kilometers an hour. That being said, it's great in other ways. Its missiles are a little difficult to use given the massive cage that they have. However, it gets fantastic bomb load and good flight performance and guns. You can easily use this to fully bomb a base and then kill 1 to 2 targets a game, which will give you fantastic potential to earn money and research points. Overall, if you learn how to use this thing and you don't go too far away from the way that you should be playing it, I would give it a solid 7.5 out of 10.